The largest of the Scandinavian countries, Sweden has played a major historical role in Northern Europe. It has a well-developed economy and a high standard of living. Its social welfare system protects citizens against financial problems and has been a model for those of other European countries. The capital of Sweden is Stockholm. Area 172,750 square miles, 447,420 square kilometers. Population, 2020 est. 10,381,000. Land and climate. Sweden measures about 1,000 miles, 1,600 kilometers, from north to south and 310 miles, 500 kilometers, from west to east. About 15% of the country lies within the Arctic Circle. Sweden is bounded on the west by Norway and on the northeast by Finland. On the east it is bounded by the Gulf of Bothnia and on the southeast and south by the Baltic Sea. In the southwest Sweden is separated from Denmark by two straits, the Kattegat and the Sound, Øresund, which connect the Baltic and North Seas. Numerous islands form chains along Sweden's jagged, rocky coastline. The coastline is more than 1,300 miles, 2,100 kilometers, in length. Most of Sweden is part of the Baltic Shield, a region of ancient rocks. Much of the shield in Sweden consists of mountains. The highest mountains form a long ridge that separates Sweden from Norway. The highest peaks are in the north, where Mount Kebney, or Kebnekaise, reaches 6,926 feet, 2,111 meters, in height. The mountain region slopes eastward to a narrow plain that fringes the Gulf of Bothnia. The southern third of the country is much flatter. A lowland zone extends across the country and broadens around Stockholm to form Sweden's largest area of plains. South of the lowland zone there is a region of hills that in places reach heights of about 1,000 feet, 300 meters. In the extreme south, an area of lowland known as Skane is called the Granary of Sweden, because its climate favors agriculture, especially grain production. A coastal plain links Skane with the Stockholm region. A few miles from this coast lies the long, flat island of Åland, with the larger island of Gotland to the northeast. There are a number of lakes, which occupy about 8% of the area of the country. The largest are Lakes Vänern, Vättern, and Mälaren, all located in the southern lowland belt. In the north, long lakes occupy many of the mountain valleys. The country's chief rivers originate in the mountains. They flow mostly southeastward with many falls and rapids and empty into the Gulf of Bothnia or the Baltic Sea. The longest river in Sweden is the Klar-Göta River, which runs for about 447 miles, 719 kilometers. It rises in Norway as the Klar River, enters Lake Vänern, and emerges as the Göta River, which flows into the Kattegat. The Torne River and its tributary the Muonio River form the border with Finland. The climate of Sweden is diverse because of the great length of the country from north to south. The climate is also affected by the country's location between the maritime influences of the Atlantic Ocean and the continental influences from the east. Considering how far north Sweden lies, it enjoys a comparatively moderate climate. Stockholm has an average July temperature of 64 degrees Fahrenheit, 18 degrees Celsius, and an average January temperature of 27 degrees Fahrenheit, -3 degrees Celsius. The average January temperature at Haparanda in northern Sweden is 10 degrees Fahrenheit, -12 degrees Celsius, while at Malmö in the south it is 33 degrees Fahrenheit, 0.5 degrees Celsius. Sweden's annual average precipitation is about 24 inches, 60 centimeters. Plants and animals. Most of Sweden is covered by coniferous, cone-bearing, trees, mainly spruce and pine. The southern part of the country has some deciduous trees that lose their leaves seasonally, such as beech, oak, elm, ash, and maple. In the higher mountain areas there are forests of birch, with some aspen and mountain ash. Above the timberline there is a moorland vegetation of mosses and lichens. The country's many forests are rich in berries and mushrooms. The most common animals include hares, weasels, shrews, squirrels, foxes, ermines, roe deer, and moose. In some areas bears are found. Wolves, lynxes, and wolverines occur only in the northern forests. Some otters, badgers, and pine martens are also found. Lemmings live in the northern mountains. The large variety of birds includes snipes, plovers, wagtails, partridges, and ptarmigans, with some grouse and woodcocks. Seabirds, such as gulls, terns, and eider ducks, are common. Rivers and lakes have salmon, trout, perch, and pike. On the west coast cod, herrings, mackerel, and flatfish are found, while the Baltic Sea contains a small herring called strömming, as well as gray seals and porpoises. Crayfish are found in inland waters in southern Sweden and are considered a great delicacy. In the summer, the northern region of Sweden produces myriads of stinging insects such as mosquitoes and gadflies. People and culture. People. The great majority of the people of Sweden are of ethnic Swedish origin. The two main minority groups of indigenous peoples are the Finns and the Sami, Lapps. The Finns live mainly in the northeast, along the border with Finland. In Sweden's northern interior live some 20,000 Sami. Once a hunting and fishing people, the Sami developed a system of herding reindeer that they still practice today. Most of the Sami in Sweden have other occupations as well. Although different groups of immigrants have influenced Swedish culture through the centuries, the population of Sweden historically has been unusually alike in ethnicity, language, and religion. In the 20th century, however, Sweden began to receive more immigrants. At first, most of the people moving to Sweden came from other Scandinavian countries. Starting in the late 20th century, Sweden began to receive an increasing number of refugees from countries in the Middle East and Africa, including Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Turkey, Eritrea, and Somalia. Many people from Latin American countries that were suffering under repressive governments also moved to Sweden. In the second decade of the 21st century, the number of people seeking asylum, a place of safety, in Sweden expanded dramatically. They included many people fleeing from a civil war in Syria. The national language of Sweden is Swedish. It belongs to the Scandinavian group of Germanic languages and shares many features in common with Norwegian and Danish. Finnish and the Sami languages belong to the Finno-Ugric group. About 200 languages are now spoken in Sweden because of immigration. Most of Sweden's people are Protestants, mainly Lutherans belonging to the Church of Sweden. Immigration has brought many Muslims, Roman Catholics, and Greek Orthodox Christians to Sweden. Judaism has been practiced in Sweden since the late 18th century. More than 80% of the population lives in urban settlements. The largest city is the capital, Stockholm, which is also the country's educational, cultural, and industrial center. Other major Swedish cities are Göteborg, Gothenburg, Malmö, and Uppsala. Most of the Swedish population, both urban and rural, are concentrated in the south of the country. Culture. Swedish literature dates back to the 13th and 14th centuries, when books of law appeared. In 1541, a Bible translation by Olaus Petri marked the beginning of the modern Swedish language. King Gustav III encouraged the writing of literature by founding the Swedish Academy in 1786. In the 18th century, one of Sweden's greatest poets, Carl Michael Bellman, wrote songs set to his own music that are still popular. In the 19th century, such poets as Erik Gustaf Geyer and Esaias Tegnér were inspired by Sweden's past. Other poets, such as Victor Rydberg and Carl Snoilsky, followed a realist trend in literature. In the 20th century, the greatest of Sweden's literary figures, August Strindberg, wrote novels and plays that had a great influence on the development of European literature. Other authors who wrote at the beginning of the 20th century were Gustaf af Geijerstam, Albert Engström, and Selma Lagerlöf, a Nobel Prize winner in 1909. Lagerlöf was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. Swedish poets include Gustaf Fröding and Verner von Heidenstam, who won a Nobel Prize in 1916. Some of the most notable modern Swedish writers, Per Lagerkvist, poet Harry Martinson, and novelist Eyvind Johnson, were Nobel laureates. The Nobel Prizes were instituted by the Swedish scientist Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite. In contemporary Swedish literature, such authors as Kirsten Ekman, P.C. Jersild, Lars Gustafsson, Sarah Lidman, Henning Mankell, and Michael Niemi found a wide audience. Stieg Larsson dazzled readers worldwide with a series of detective novels that helped to set the stage for international appreciation of Swedish and Scandinavian crime fiction. One of the most widely published and translated modern Swedish writers is Astrid Lindgren, noted for her children's books, including the famous Pippi Longstocking series. The most famous Swedish artist was probably Anders Zorn, who produced remarkable paintings and etchings. The sculptor Carl Mills designed fountains and monuments both in Sweden and the United States. Sweden is renowned for its leadership in glass and furniture design. The country has also been a world leader in industrial design. Sweden's contribution to music lies mainly in the country's singers. Famous Swedish singers include Jenny Lind, Birgit Nilsson, and Jussi Björling. Popular music, especially the Europop of the internationally celebrated group ABBA, and music production, editing, and advertising were major Swedish exports from the late 1970s on. Swedes have made important contributions to film. Actor-director Victor Sjöström was a pioneer of the Swedish film industry in the silent and early sound eras. Later, director Ingmar Bergman was hailed internationally as one of the most important filmmakers of all time. Other notable people of the Swedish film industry include actors Greta Garbo, Ingrid Bergman, Bibi Andersson, and Max von Sydow, and director Lasse Hallström. Sweden has a rich heritage of folk culture, which developed when the population consisted mainly of farmers. Local folk costumes, art, and music have largely vanished from everyday Swedish life but are maintained for special occasions. They can also be found at the numerous open-air folk museums, where old farmhouses and other aspects of former peasant life are on display. One such open-air museum is at Skansen in Stockholm. There are some special holidays celebrated by the Swedes. On December 13, young girls wear headdresses of wreaths decorated with lighted candles and serve coffee and special buns to older family members. This day is known as St. Lucia's Day, and there are parades and celebrations in most communities. The holiday marks the beginning of the Christmas season, and it is meant to bring hope and light during the darkest time of the year. Midsummer Eve is celebrated about June 21, the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, with dances and songs. At this time of the year, in most of Sweden it is light until late at night. Education and social welfare. The education system in Sweden is, with few exceptions, public and open to all free of charge, including at the university level. Education is compulsory for children between the ages of 7 and 16. Upper secondary schools provide further education. Higher education is offered by numerous institutions, including technical, medical, dental, business, education, and other types of schools. There are universities in Uppsala, founded in 1477, Lund, Stockholm, Göteborg, Umeå, Linköping, Karlstad and Vaxå. Sweden is also home to other world-renowned institutions, including the Karolinska Institute of Medicine, and the Chalmers University of Technology. In return for paying high taxes, Swedes are provided with a broad spectrum of public services and social welfare benefits that guarantee a minimum living standard and provide aid in emergencies. All residents are covered by national health insurance. Health conditions in Sweden are among the best in the world. Infant mortality is low, and the average life expectancy at birth is high. Economy. The Swedish economy plays a more significant role in the world than the size of the country's population would suggest. In particular, the country's industries manufacture a large number of products that are exported around the world. Sweden's economic development was greatly helped by the fact that the country has not fought in any wars for more than 200 years. Agriculture, fishing, and forestry. Swedish agriculture accounts for only a small fraction of the labor force. Most farms are owned by families and are mainly medium to small in size. Major crops include barley, wheat, oats, sugar beets, potatoes, oilseeds, and hay. Pigs and cattle are the main livestock. In the north some Sami tend large herds of reindeer. Sweden imports grain and other foodstuffs. Fishing is a small industry in Sweden. Herring, cod, plaice, mackerel, and salmon are caught, as well as shrimp and lobster. Forestry is important to the Swedish economy. The forestry sector provides wood for factories that make forest products for export. Industry. The three basic resources on which Swedish industry is based are forests, iron ore, and hydroelectric power. Most industry is specialized. High-quality iron and steel is produced in a number of localities in the central region and at the ports of Oxelösund and Luleå. Much of the country's steel goes to the engineering industries, which produce automobiles, aerospace equipment, ball bearings, and various kinds of equipment and tools. Swedish automakers Volvo and Saab enjoyed strong international reputations into the early 21st century. In 2011 Saab declared bankruptcy, but most of its assets were purchased by the new company National Electric Vehicles Sweden, or NEVS. Sweden is home to several other very large corporations. The SKF Group is a large manufacturer of ball bearings, cutting tools, and machine components. Other Swedish firms that market their products worldwide include Electrolux, IKEA, and Swedish Match. Other products made in Sweden include electronics, food products, glassware, and plastics. Stockholm is a leading center for the production of communications equipment. Sweden is a major world exporter of forest products. The country's factories make sawed timber, wood pulp, paper, furniture, and prefabricated houses. Mining and energy. Sweden is a major producer of iron ore. It has some of the richest iron ore deposits in the world. Most of the deposits are located north of the Arctic Circle. A wide range of other metals, including gold, copper, lead, and zinc, are also mined in northern Sweden. The copper, silver, and iron ore deposits of central Sweden either have been largely exhausted or are unprofitable to extract. Sweden has few energy resources. There is no coal or petroleum, and large quantities of these fossil fuels must be imported. The major sources of energy are hydroelectric and nuclear power. A number of dams and power stations on the northern rivers produce electric power, which is transmitted to the south by long-distance cables. Some power is also generated from thermal plants. Services. Service industries, such as trade, finance, real estate, tourism, government, and education, account for most of the country's jobs and national income. The export of services, including business services and technology consultant services, is also significant. Trade is especially important, with exports supplying about a third of Sweden's gross domestic product, GDP. Principal exports include engineering products, such as cars and telecommunications equipment, medicines and other chemical products, forest products, and iron and steel products. Sweden imports machinery, petroleum, chemicals, food products, motor vehicles, textiles, and other goods. The country's major trade partners include Germany, Norway, the United Kingdom, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Finland. Transportation and communications. Sweden has an extensive transportation network, including railways, roads, and highways. Most households own at least one car. Local public bus transportation is also well developed. Sea links are important, and the Baltic and North Seas are crossed by several passenger ferry routes. Sweden has a sizable merchant fleet. Göteborg and Stockholm are among the most important of some 20 ports handling foreign trade. Sweden, along with Denmark and Norway, operates the Scandinavian airline system, SAS, which has a wide international network. The most important airports are in Stockholm, Göteborg, and Malmö. As the telecommunications industry has grown in Sweden, so too have telecommunications improved. The country is among the world's leaders in internet access, with a great majority of Swedes able to go online. Television and radio programs are broadcast by a non-commercial semi-governmental corporation. Government. Under the Constitution of 1975, Sweden is a constitutional monarchy. King Carl XVI Gustaf came to the throne in 1973. His role is largely ceremonial, and the sole political power rests with the Riksdag, parliament. The Riksdag has 349 members elected for 4-year terms. The Prime Minister is the political chief executive and has a cabinet of ministers who make collective decisions on political and other matters. The major political parties include the Social Democratic Party, a socialist party closely allied with trade unions, and the Moderate Party, a center-right party that has supported lower taxes and a smaller role for the government in the economy. Also prominent are the Center, Liberal, Left, and Green parties. The Social Democratic Party dominated politics for most of the 20th century. Under it, the welfare state system developed, resulting in a wide variety of social security benefits that provide the average citizen with protection against financial problems of unemployment, sickness, and old age. These services are very expensive to maintain and are paid for by one of the highest tax rates in the world. History. Early history. Swedish history begins with the activities of the Vikings in the 9th century. The Vikings established a trading center at Birka near modern Stockholm. They followed river routes from the Baltic Sea to the interior of Russia, where they established strongholds. The Swedish Vikings also reached Constantinople, now Istanbul, Turkey, and the Caspian Sea. Christianity spread slowly in Sweden after the baptism of King Olaf. Olaf Skotkonung, at the end of the 10th century. Royal power was weak, and the country was divided into a number of provinces that had their own laws. As Sweden gradually became more unified, Uppsala emerged as the first capital. About 1250 the city of Stockholm was founded. Being close to the sea, it grew rapidly as a port and commercial center, and by the 15th century it had become the capital of the country. The founder of Stockholm was probably Birger Jarl, who produced the first Swedish national laws in the mid-13th century. He also gave German merchants privileges for trade with Sweden. By the following century Sweden's trade was almost entirely controlled by the German Hanseatic League, and the richest and most powerful citizens were German traders. The Middle Ages were marked by internal struggles for supremacy between the kings, their relatives, and the nobles. In 1397 King Eric of Pomerania was elected King of Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. An attempt to consolidate the three countries into a single kingdom was made in a proposal for the Kalmar Union, which was never ratified. Eric was deposed in Sweden and Denmark in 1439 and in Norway in 1442. There followed a period of unrest and revolts. A nobleman, Sten Sture the Elder, became state administrator of Sweden in 1471 and served as regent for many years. He died in 1503. In 1520 King Christian II of Denmark landed in Sweden and put many supporters of the still powerful Sture family to death in the Stockholm bloodbath. A growing power, the Swedes expelled the Danes in 1523, and King Gustav I Vasa came to the throne as the ruler of an independent Sweden. By 1537 he had broken the trade monopoly of the Hanseatic League and laid the foundations for the growth of Sweden as a strong state. At this time the Reformation reached Sweden, and the Lutheran form of Protestantism eventually became the national religion. In the 17th century Sweden emerged as a great power in the Baltic region. Finland was already under Swedish control, and Estonia had been annexed in 1595. King Gustavus Adolphus played the major role in Sweden's rise to power. By seizing more eastern Baltic territories from Russia and Poland, he turned the Baltic into a Swedish sea. He joined the German Protestants in their wars against the Austrian Roman Catholics but was killed at Lutzen in 1632. Sweden gained territory in Pomerania on the southern coast of the Baltic. In 1660 the Swedes won from Denmark the islands of Osel and Gotland and other Danish territories in southern Sweden. Sweden's decline as a great power began under the reign of Charles XII. After military successes against the Danes, Poles, and Russians, Charles attempted an invasion of Russia and was defeated at Poltava in 1709. After his death Sweden's power gradually decreased. The rising power of Russia and continued opposition from Denmark created serious problems. A war between Sweden and Russia took place between 1788 and 1790, and in 1808 Russia annexed Finland. In 1810 one of Napoleon's generals, Jean Bernadotte, was invited to become crown prince. He became king in 1818 as Charles XIV John. Napoleon approved the union of Sweden and Norway, which took place despite Norwegian opposition, in 1815. This union was dissolved in 1905. The 20th and 21st centuries, Sweden remained neutral in World War I but suffered from the European economic crisis that followed. The Social Democrats, in power from 1932 to 1976, expanded the modern welfare state. Sweden was again neutral in World War II, but it permitted German troops to cross Swedish territory in order to reach Norway. Sweden provided shelter, however, for many refugees of German oppression. The post-war period was marked by the further development of the Swedish economy. Sweden became one of the most prosperous countries in Europe. The Social Democrat leader Olof Palme was prime minister from 1969 until 1976. After a short period of rule by a center-right coalition government, Palme returned to power in 1982. In 1986 he was assassinated on a Stockholm street. A suspect was found guilty in 1989, but an appeals court overturned the conviction because of insufficient evidence. In 1991 the moderate party leader was named prime minister. It was only the second time in 60 years that Sweden was governed under a non-socialist leader. The Social Democrats returned to power after winning a general election in September 1994. In the early 21st century, power alternated between the Social Democrats and the moderates. Sweden has been a member of the United Nations, UN, since 1946. The country joined the European Union, EU, on January 1, 1995, after a referendum on membership was approved by voters in November 1994. Sweden did not, however, adopt the euro, the European single currency, when the euro was introduced in 1999. Sweden held the EU's rotating presidency in 2001. In September 2003, Swedish Foreign Minister Anna Lindh was fatally stabbed in a Stockholm department store. Lindh had been a leader in the campaign to adopt the euro. In a referendum held days after her murder, however, the country again rejected the European currency. Although the Swedish economy was hard hit by the global financial crisis and economic downturn of 2008-09, it was able to bounce back quickly. However, the unemployment rate was high among young people, and many Swedes were dissatisfied with the growing gap between the rich and the poor. Sweden was at the center of a migrant crisis that swept through Europe in 2015. More than 1 million migrants arrived in Europe after fleeing turmoil in the Middle East, most notably the Syrian civil war, and Africa. That year, more than 160,000 migrants came to Sweden, a prosperous country with a generous welfare system and a reputation for being welcoming. Swedish social service facilities were overwhelmed by the mass influx of people. Some Swedes, especially those who supported an anti-immigration political party, were also afraid that terrorists might be posing as migrants. In response, Sweden enacted new immigration restrictions. The government also denied refugee status to tens of thousands of people who sought asylum in Sweden, meaning that they had to leave the country. Sweden was not a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. However, Russia's military presence in the Baltic region generally became more aggressive in the 2010s. As a result, in 2016 Sweden agreed to provide host nation support for NATO forces. It also stationed a permanent force of Swedish troops on the Baltic island of Gotland. Sweden's rulers from 1523. You can subscribe to support our channel and turn on the notification bell to be notified of new videos.